Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Thank you for waiting a minute while I finished getting set up, even though the countdown had finished. Welcome to today's stream. My name is Ariana. I am the co-director of the Consent Academy, an international nonprofit that aims to promote consent as part of everyday life. And I'm very excited to be here today. Hello, Jan. Thanks for joining. And thank you to the new follower. I didn't get to catch the name, but I saw that we met our current follower goal. So that's really great. Thank you so much. And it makes me really happy. I've got another migraine today, unfortunately. It's not as bad. I did go see my new neurologist today. Was not able to get Botox for my migraine. For those of you who don't know, Botox is like an amazing treatment for chronic migraines, which is what I have. Because basically, like, you can still have the migraine, but it like paralyzes the muscles that are involved in most of the sensations of pain. And that really makes a big difference. But I wasn't able to get Botox today. I have to wait till the end of May to do it. But that's fine. I can wait. So it's going to be kind of a chill day. Probably a decent amount of Stardew Valley. I also have a sinking feeling today that I'm like forgetting something important, but I don't remember what it is. So we'll see. Anyway, welcome everybody. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, wherever you are, whatever you're up to. I hope it's going well. So today we're going to read this article and talk about some deep dive into the subject of rumination. And we're also going to talk about how rumination does things like impacts friendship, impacts consent, and even does things like impacts our activism or our efforts to do different types of things, how it can make it actually harder for us to be resilient in the face of setbacks or failure. I also want you all to see my cat Babby. He is over here. You can see he's just chilling. You can also see my trolley of stuff. This is how I manage my ADHD. I just have a trolley where I dump everything because I can't sort of keep organized. So at least it's dumped in one spot. But yeah, Babby's just chilling over there, looking very happy and sleepy. My other cat, Cutie, she was there a little while ago, but she left. Anyway, that's enough random digressions for the day. Let's just jump right into this article. So first of all, let's just even define what rumination is. So rumination, the way I would like to define it is basically like it's not the same thing as an intrusive thought. Intrusive thoughts are one of these things that has become really common in like pop psychology, especially like social media pop psychology, where people kind of want to call any unpleasant thought intrusive thought, similar to people often wanting to say feeling uncomfortable as synonymous with being triggered. And if you've watched my streams, you'll know that I think that it can actually be quite helpful to be precise with language sometimes. This is not to say that if you find certain terms to be really useful for you, if you find that they help you communicate something that you're unable to communicate in other ways, or they don't fit right or whatever, if you find that it's working for you, I'm not going to say that you're bad or wrong for doing it. What I'm going to say is that just check to make sure that there isn't actually another term that's meant to describe what it is you're experiencing. Because, for example, if you go to a therapist or a doctor and you use these really specialized terms in the wrong way, you can end up getting misdiagnosed, not treated correctly, not necessarily given the support you need, but also at some point when the definition of a word becomes too diluted, for example, if we call everything trauma, then nothing is trauma. And then it makes it really hard for people to actually talk about their trauma. And this is not to say I'm trying to like gatekeep trauma, for example. Lowercase t trauma is part of everyday life. It is part of the human experience. We all experience many lowercase t traumas over the course of our life. Those are the sorts of things that are way outside of our window of tolerance, are stress beyond what it is we're able to handle, usually just very high erotin, very much like um, high ghrelin, uh, things that are outside of our ability to even like process really what's happening in the moment a lot of the time, but are things that over time we're able to process and integrate and sort of like, um, yeah, sort of integrate is the best word for it. Whereas an uppercase T trauma, sometimes people can process and integrate them on their own, but a lot of the time, those are the things that create really serious lasting change and lead to a trauma syndrome like post traumatic stress disorder. And the difference there often is, like 6 months to a year of needing time to process and integrate something is usually still within the lowercase t trauma, whereas uppercase stuff is the kind of thing that is likely to take you much longer and likely to need outside support. Okay, setting that aside, ruminating is basically when you can't let shit go. And there are many, many, many different ways to ruminate. But rumination is a really, really common thing that people do. And it's a really fun way to torture yourself, basically. It's just a really nice way to get into a lot of those cognitive distortions. Rumination is a great playground for cognitive distortions to come out. And I'll bring up the cognitive distortion checklist again. These are the most common ones. And again, I'll put this into the chat so everyone can have it. I'll put the article in the chat too. Where you might start, magnifying or minimizing something. Fun here. Oh, you need me to define fun, Krellin? Yeah. There's so many different ways that we can torture ourselves. And I find that rumination allows for some pretty unique types of creativity. So that's why I say it's fun. And yeah, right, you say you have a hard time with ruminating. I'm not surprised because it's so common. It's basically, a thing a lot of us do just like on the daily, right? And we might ruminate about something that happened today or really recently, or we might even ruminate about things that happened a long time ago. And, like I caught myself ruminating earlier today and I made myself kind of stressed out because of it. So, like, I have really bad chronic migraines. And I was recently talking with some family members, and one of my other family members gets chronic migraines too. They also get Botox for them, just like me. But they had said recently that they went to the ER for their migraine, which was surprising to me because, like, I've been to the ER twice for migraines. The first time I had one, and that was because the university's health services. The first time I had one, I had like a severe headache with it. I used to get ocular migraines when I was a kid, but anyway, the university health services, like legally, they had to send to me so I could go get a CT scan to make sure I wasn't like having a stroke or an aneurysm. And then the second time I went to the ER is because I got an aura where I went blind. This happens 4 to 6 times a year for me. I get 2 types of migraines. I get the ones that come on really quickly that are just like real shit headaches, and I get 5 out of 7 days of the week when they're really bad. Will probably be in that. And then I get these really big ones where I go temporarily blind 4 to 6 times a year. Okay, so I've been dealing with this since I was a kid. My family all knows this, but my brother was like, I went to the ER for it, and I was really surprised because I was kind of like, other than like IV fluids, what can they really do? And I asked this, and my relative was very much like, took it as indication that clearly they started explaining what a migraine was to me, and I interrupted them several times to be like, I know, I get them too, but like, what do they actually do for you at the hospital? And there was this sort of assumption, I think, and now this is a little bit of projection, and I know, and I'm going to talk you through my rumination. I got the impression, with very little evidence, right? Because we can never actually know why somebody does something or what they're actually thinking without an honest self-report. But this is what it felt like to me, was that because I don't go to the ER for my migraines aren't as bad. And I'm like, also like, but I don't actually have any evidence that they were thinking that. What I get more of an impression of is just that, like, my family's forgetful. They just launched into a, like, someone asked me the question and I just launched into my default spiel about what my migraines are, not really thinking about who they were talking to. That's way more likely. But I got like kind of stressed by this conversation because I was kind of like, oh, do they not take my migraines as seriously? Anyway, and they started explaining that they get Botox because theirs are so bad. I'm like, me too. And um, so then what ended up happening is they told me, oh, that they get, like IV opioids. And I was like, oh, that's rough. I'm allergic to, technically not allergic. You can't actually be allergic to opioids. I am hypersensitive to opioids. You give me any, I will just stop breathing. And I learned this the hard way. It was an organ failure as a teenager. And they gave me morphine and then it almost killed me. But anyway, I can't take opioids. Really, like when it comes to painkillers, the best thing I can get is called like dexibuprofen, which is like fancy, super strong ibuprofen. That's it. That's like all that exists for me. And I've tried all these other, like prophylactics for migraines and painkillers and stuff, and they don't really work, especially because I can't take anything that is even like similar to an opioid. My body just like, it's just like, what if we stop breathing when this happens? Anyway, I'm really, really sensitive to them. Okay. So after that person left the call, the other person I was on the call with just started talking about how like bad they felt for this person, that their migraines were so bad and they really wished it. And I was just like, yeah, I agree. And also I wish my migraines would stop too. And then they were just like, yeah, but they have to go to the hospital all the time for their migraines. And I'm like, yeah, except for the fact that like I would go to the hospital if they could actually do anything for me, but they can't. Anyway, anyway, there's this problem where I have this reputation with some of my family of being like strong and resilient and the one you never have to worry about. And there's a little bit of that, which came first thing. Was it actually that I was strong and resilient, or was it that a lot of the time my experiences weren't taken as seriously or given as much grace or whatever, and had to become strong and resilient as a result? So, anyway, it's really small. This is very, very small. But I started ruminating about it because I had a really bad headache. I was sitting in the doctor's office waiting to see the doctor. I was getting really overstimulated because, like, the waiting room got really noisy because there were like people outside and they were talking. And yeah, exactly. And Arad, and just as an aside, I don't actually like to call it the chicken and the egg issue because there's a very, very specific answer to the chicken and the egg. The egg came first. Eggs evolved millions of years before chickens did. Dinosaurs had eggs. Chickens came way later. The egg came first. Anyway, that's just my. I have a hard time with things that I feel like I'm just like, but there's actually an answer to this. Um, Remember, I'm the kind of person who someone makes a joke and I won't laugh because I'll be like, well, your joke is factually inaccurate. So I kind of, this was like my brain 24/7. Anyway, I was in this waiting room. I was getting really overstimulated and I was feeling stressed. And then my brain went to a thing that made me kind of stressed recently, which was this conversation. And it wasn't a big deal. It was more of a mild annoyance, but it's the kind of thing that it's easy for me to get into a rumination spiral with that because it also feels to me like it's a pattern of some sort of bigger thing. And this is where I can also get into overgeneralizing, right? 99% of the time, my interactions with my family are perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong. Every once in a while, there's like an awkward conversation, or there's something that kind of miffs me or whatever. I don't really like it. But for the most part, it's fine. It's just, the normal annoyances of close family, right? However, if I start to get into a rumination spiral and I start thinking about it and thinking about it and I can't let it go, and I start bringing the feelings up and maybe even intensifying them really good at hurting my own feelings, I can start to be like, this is how it always is with my family. They never take my experiences seriously. And I even caught myself thinking, my family has never taken my pain seriously, which is actually 100% untrue. And the thing is, though, I had that thought and I just felt myself just like getting worked up. And I caught myself. I caught myself because I practice identifying my feelings. This is a thing that everyone should practice as much as possible on the regular, just like practice scanning yourself, identifying your feelings, naming them, and actually thinking about like what is causing it in this given moment. Whether you're feeling content or just chill to like intense feeling, just kind of practice this. And I also practice really hard looking for cognitive distortions and catching myself ruminating. Now, the thing is because I've practiced it so much, I don't usually do this kind of thing very much anymore. I'm really good at getting myself out of it really quickly when I do. But when I have a bad headache and I didn't sleep very much, I got like 3 hours of sleep last night because my migraine was so bad, it like kept me up all night. And like, yeah, I don't know, it was just a rough night of sleep. And I like couldn't. These all are things that reduce my capacity, right? And remember, capacity is one of the main pillars of things like consent, even when it comes to consensual behavior with ourselves. So the fact that I was already in this like reduced capacity state, my head was hurting worse and worse. I was really like eager to get into the doctor's office to see like, can I get Botox today? Please, 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 because it wouldn't work to fix this migraine because it takes a few days for it to actually like start to paralyze the muscles. I was really just like, oh, please, please, please. And, you know, I was also worried that they were going to like tell me I had to go get like a brain scan again. And I'm like, but I've had so many MRIs. There's nothing structurally wrong with my brain. Surprise, surprise. And so like my migraine isn't because I've got like a tumor or like a venous malformation or an aneurysm or something. Okay, setting all this aside. And I was getting overstimulated. It was much easier for me to get into this rumination spiral. And one of the other things that can happen is it's really common and as a way to get into rumination is something called emotional reasoning. So emotional reasoning is fundamentally you have a feeling which can be triggered by anything. Thank you, Aradin. And then before you know it, you start to ascribe meaning to that feeling. So a common example is a lot of people get stomach aches when they're stressed. And but the thing is if I get a stomach ache, that's because I ate something bad. But I don't realize that. I might misidentify the stomach ache is because must be because I'm stressed and just don't realize it, which then will cause my brain to start to search for why am I stressed? And then it's pretty easy to figure out like a bunch of things that I should be stressing about. You know, one of the great superpowers of ADHD, which I always feel silly saying superpowers, but whatever. One of the things that I find as advantageous about ADHD is it's really easy for me to forget about the things that I should be stressed by. Sometimes this backfires because then you like unintentionally put things off for way too long. But for the most part, it's really nice because I forget to be mad at people. I forget to feel hurt by what people have done. For the most part, I just forget about bad. Like I can have a really shit day, but if the last 5 minutes are pretty decent, I'm going to be like, hey, it was a good day. And that's just how it is for me and my ADHD. But, there are always going to be things lurking on the edge of my consciousness. Hi, Paladin Hulk. What did you say? I wanted to go to a protest, but the train was full. I took that as a sign that it wasn't meant to go instead of just waiting 20 minutes for the next train, which maybe wouldn't be full. Nice. What was the protest about? I would love to know. So, there are plenty of things that are sort of like on the edge of my consciousness that I could be stressed by, right? And similarly, before I got treatment for my heart problems, I would get into these really hardcore tachycardic arrhythmias. And with that would come a sense of doom because like my heart was not actually beating correctly. And as the surgeons told me, they're surprised I hadn't died a long time ago because my heart was doing some really not correct things. It's fixed now. I still have different heart problems, but the potentially going to kill you ones are gone. Anyway, I would get this like impending sense of like something was really wrong. And then physiologically would get put into like basically a panic attack state of like thinking all of these terrible thoughts. I would start ruminating and all these cognitive distortions would come up. So these things can be triggered in any different kind of way, right? It's not just a something happens that gives me a feeling or I do like it. Remember the cognitive triangle, the thoughts, feelings, and actions, they all influence each other. Our feelings can be triggered by our thoughts or our actions or the actions of other people, but also feelings can trigger these different things. And so this is one of those things that's also tough, where like if I get defeated in something, right? Like I have this big, activism effort. Like I'm pushing for this bill. I'm going to the city council meetings. I'm showing up to all of them or the city planning board or whatever, and it doesn't work. I could really easily get into ruminating about it, really just like obsessively thinking over and over and over again, what could have been different? What could have been different? What could have been different? And if I don't find anything satisfactory, I might start to think this is proof that this kind of activism doesn't work. Or I might think that the whole effort was wrong and I forget to look at the things that were successful here. Hey, we got together as activists. We actually got an effort going on. We made some progress. We actually showed up consistently to these things. Those are not easy achievements. But if I get into rumination about how it didn't succeed, I could easily start to make it very unlikely that I'm ever going to mount that kind of effort ever again. Okay. Yeah, Aradin, there is something called the gut brain, and it's not in your stomach, it's more along your intestines. And we do have neurons in our intestines, and there's a lot of really interesting research about it. And then Paladin Hulk, oh, it was a counter protest against some Nazis who were upset that a drag queen was reading stories to children, which she'd been doing for years. Ended up with 200 counter protesters and 20 Nazis. So it all ended up okay. So yeah, this is also something I've been thinking about a lot. There's this thing that they did that happened during or pre-World War II, during the like rise of the Nazi Party, where they would go and intentionally do demonstrations and protests in very liberal or leftist areas because they knew more counter protesters would show up than the people at their rally or whatever. And that things, they would often try to get it to go to violence, to a scuffle, as a, hi to Tibron, as a way to then be like, look at how unreasonable and how violent these leftists are. Only we can save you from them. And I feel like that's actually kind of starting to happen with some of these rallies and protests. Like I feel like people are intentionally going into areas where they know they will be outnumbered, that their opinion is unpopular, as a way to just be like, so much for the tolerant left, right? Anyway, Rodney said, yeah, I have issues with the psychosomatism, so I have to be careful as I can easily give myself a headache or get my back to seize up. I have scoliosis, so I have regular back pain. Yeah, it's really easy to do that as well. It's really easy to get yourself into, psychosomatic. Pulling, that was my WhatsApp. I forgot to mute it before I started the stream. It's really easy to do that. And I'm sorry you have scoliosis. It's not fun. It's a lot can be put at risk because of ruminating, especially ruminating just like allowed to go completely off the rails. Also, you got to see this. My cat is completely fallen asleep on the heater. Look at him. One little paw on there. Oh, he woke back up. He heard me say his cat, and he knows that means I'm talking about him. But he's so cute. I do have the heat on a little bit today because it's still pretty cold here. Okay, anyway, let's jump to this article. How to stop ruminating. Okay. Stuck in a mental loop of worries and problems that seem to have no end, here's what you can do. And so you've got this really cute little looping video here of like this cute little like almost claymation but digital dude like having thoughts and just being like boo boo boo. He has this thought bubble above him, and then it just like comes and goes over his head like a big water balloon, and he looks all panicked. All right, so perhaps you spend hours replaying a tense conversation you had with your boss over and over in your head. Or maybe you can't stop thinking about where things went wrong with an ex during the weeks and months after a breakup. If you find that your thoughts are so excessive and overwhelming that you can't seem to stop them, or if they're so distracting that you're falling behind on responsibilities at work or at home, you're probably experiencing rumination. So I would say that you can also experience rumination that doesn't necessarily have to reach this intensity. It can just be that you think about it again, you start to have an emotional reaction, and you want to be able to stop thinking about it, but you struggle to. It just keeps coming back up. Or you get into like an over analysis of something. Because, what I was doing earlier today was a type of rumination. But because I've practiced skills to stop doing it, I'm able to catch myself doing it and get myself out of it pretty quickly. So what I did earlier today was I was like, oh shit, I'm ruminating and I'm making myself feel really bad and I want to stop. So I just started doing some deep breathing and I focused on some other sensations. Mostly I just started like shaking one of my legs or like bouncing it and just really focused my attention on that while I did deep breathing. And that was enough to get me out of it. And then I went back to like looking at memes on my phone while I waited for the doctor's appointment. Okay. So, while rumination is not a mental health condition, it can be a symptom of a larger problem. And in some cases, it can become so encompassing that it requires intervention, Dr. Marks said. Here's how to tell if your thought patterns have transitioned from regular overthinking into rumination and how to stop them if they have. Yeah, I would agree. It's like a sliver in your mind. I think that's not a bad way to describe it. And, rumination, here they're saying like overthinking, regular overthinking to rumination. There is a difference, right? And this is more about like gradation and intensity. But I know myself, for example, and if I hadn't employed the skills that I have, I probably would still be like thinking about this one small conversation I had where I just felt mildly not listened to. That was really easy for me to like kind of blow out of proportion in my head and then just start to feel like this, do all of these, overgeneralization and trying to mind read and etc. Okay, so first, identify if you actually have a problem. Thinking and worrying are normal parts of life, said Greg Siegel, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine who studies rumination. Everyone has the capacity to overthink, but a sign of trouble is if your thoughts become so persistent that they're like a car without brakes, he said. If you realize, I don't want to be thinking about this, but I feel I can't stop, that's when you know your thinking is compulsive and is considered rumination. So this is exactly it. This is the best way to just define it, is thoughts that you realize you don't want to be having, but you can't get yourself to stop thinking about, unless you've got skills. Paladin Huggy said, I think if I work hard, I can complete that checklist. Said Michael Greenberg, a clinical psychologist in a private practice in LA who specializes in rumination and obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. Another potential sign of rumination is if you're overthinking issues that lack a solution, Dr. Marks said. Replaying an awkward conversation from a party in your head can be normal, but if you can't stop the loop to the point where you're distracted from important things you need to do, that's problematic, especially because your thinking won't change any of the outcomes from the past. Certain people are more likely to ruminate than others. Women tend to ruminate more than men, as do people prone to perfectionism or insecurity, Dr. Mark said. I know for me, I definitely am prone to perfectionism. Yeah, I think that definitely affects it, right? Like if something wasn't perfect, then I tend to I can really start to obsess over like, what could I have done differently to make it so it would be perfect? But for the most part, I have trained myself to get out of this and mostly just be like, whatever, better luck next time. A little bit of fake it till you make it there. Rumination is also common among people with certain health issues, Dr. Siegel said, such as chronic pain or cancer, or among those who have recently suffered a cardiac event like a heart attack. In such cases, he said, it's understandable to fix on how things could be different or whether you'll be okay. Rumination also tends to occur alongside many mental health conditions, including OCD, anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. People with depression who ruminate also tend to experience worse depression and for longer. So, this is something that is really, really important because not only can this exacerbate underlying mental health conditions, there is also some research that says that rumination might even be one of the things that helps trigger depression in the first place. Like getting into the rumination tendencies might make you more prone to becoming depressed. And some of the other things to know is that we've talked a lot about over the last few weeks about dealing with conflict, dealing with difficulty, and sort of like how to continue to, have a relationship with somebody of any kind. Or also, I just think about like organizational conflict. And if one or more people in the situation are really prone to rumination, it makes it a lot harder for us to be resilient when things go wrong, because things will go wrong. You're never going to be part of any nonprofit board or like volunteer org or anything like that. No group of friends, no social club, nothing, and not have things go wrong. It's communities that really seem great and like they have everything together are doing constant work to maintain them. And things will still go wrong in those communities, but they also build a lot of skills around how to be resilient. So an example of this is like, I've been part of so many different activist groups, so many different, orgs that run different types of events and just all kinds of stuff. And inevitably things will happen where, for example, somebody is accused of some kind of harm, or somebody is doing something wrong, unethical, taking advantage of people, stealing money, whatever. Or they're like, sexually assaulting people or something. And this can really be a thing that makes or breaks a community. If the community has done work to build strong bonds that are multifaceted beforehand, like we're not all dependent on our belief in our dear leader. For example, the charismatic person who runs the org is the glue that holds everybody together. That's incredibly fragile. If we have a culture of being able to actually set boundaries with each other and people to not get very fragile around those boundaries being set, that makes you more resilient. If you're able to actually talk openly and honestly about things like conflict, about disagreements, if you don't feel like you have to walk on eggshells around people, you're going to be a lot more resilient. And I was recently in a meeting with some people who there's, some new issues in their community, some reports about somebody, and they're deciding whether or not to temporarily ban the person and have them do an accountability process, or like permanently ban, all this other kind of stuff. And the conversation really came up of like, when word gets out about this, how can we make sure that this doesn't tear our community apart? And what I said is that you can't. All you can do is work to build a more resilient community. Because the other thing was, they were like, why does this happen? It feels like every year, every other year, we get some big drama. And I'm like, because we're in a community of thousands of people, and harm is part of everyday life as well. Things go wrong. People are really bad at consent. People are really bad at communicating boundaries. And that allows a lot of things to really, really go wrong. And it's not about making it so that nothing ever goes wrong. There's some risk reduction we can do, but it's more about, do we create structures that help reduce net harm? And also, do we build community culture that allows us to stay resilient when things do go wrong? Some of that also has to include, like, some distribution of power, for example. It can't all be power hoarding and whatnot. And the same is true in friendships, right? If things really are focused on, like, this one person is the one who sets the sort of tempo of things, they're the one who usually is deciding what happens, etc. That's the person in the friend group sort of people look to for how to react to stuff. And something goes wrong between them and one other person, you can be pretty sure that the other person is the one who's going to get pushed out. Now, what does this have to do with rumination? Well, it's people who are in these much more precarious situations are much more likely to ruminate. And when you're more likely to ruminate, you're more likely to get into cognitive distortions. And cognitive distortions are huge roadblocks against any kind of collaboration, reconnection, relationship repair, etc. Rumination with a view, funny. Paladin Hook, Aradin, it definitely can send me into a depressive slump, which is why I was struggling with depression on Sunday. Yeah, I think rumination can really, really get people to feel like there's no hope. And it can also make it so it's harder for us to put effort in to repair things when things go wrong as well. Krellin, it's just like internet security. You cannot prevent a breach, so what you need to do is to take steps to make sure the damage of a breach is minimized. Exactly. You can do a ton of risk reduction, but you also got to make sure, as you just said, that when things go wrong, it doesn't destroy the whole company or whatever. All right, so let's continue. How to break the rumination cycle. The experts we spoke with said that if your rumination is on the milder side, meaning you're stuck in a stream of thoughts, but it's not so distressing or constant that it feels intolerable, certain simple strategies help. And this can also be something where you might get to this like intolerable space, but the earlier you catch yourself doing it, the easier it is to intervene. And so, for example, this is what I did earlier today. Divert your attention. I brought my attention to my leg and just like the physical sensation of moving my leg, and also to deep breathing. Okay, one of the most effective things you can do when your thoughts are spiraling out of control is to distract yourself, Dr. Siegel said. In one study published in 2011, for instance, researchers found that when socially anxious college students redirected their attention by using word rearranging exercises shortly after giving a 3-minute speech, they felt more positive about how their presentation went than those who performed a guided negative rumination session. In another study from 2008, 60 college students were asked to remember events in their lives where they had felt lonely, sad, rejected, or hurt. Then they were told to spend 8 minutes either ruminating, focusing on mindfulness prompts, or distracting themselves with random thoughts and observation. Rumination prolonged negative moods, while distraction mitigated them. Mindfulness neither helped nor worsened their moods. So this is also one of those things. I know I've talked about this a bunch, but one of the most common things that I encountered as a Buddhist monk when I was working in Seattle is a lot of people would really come in and be like, I do mindfulness. Why do I still have problems with anxiety, for example? That's just 1 second. I need to take a drink. And the thing is that mindfulness is one of like 1,000 different types of meditation. People often mix up things like insight meditation, mindfulness meditation, and zazen, and kind of mix the three of them together. And the other thing to remember is these things developed as religious aesthetic practices are meant to be done in very specific contexts and meant to be paired with very specific structures and visualizations and culture, which is not to say you can't still benefit from them, but a lot of people call things like redirecting your attention to your sensations mindfulness. That is not mindfulness. A lot of people call things mindfulness when they aren't. And mindfulness is not simply something like deep breathing. what I did earlier today isn't even mindfulness. I literally just brought my attention to something else and like really focused it there. And I made the sensation of bouncing my leg so intense that like it was really easy for it to completely consume my attention. And it's important to note also that there's a lot of research that says that Western practices of things like mindfulness can actually increase anxiety. So if you want to get benefit from any kind of meditation practice, I recommend actually finding a real teacher for it. There are plenty that are available online. There are plenty of Buddhist temples that host free online workshops on meditation, things like that. There are probably temples, depending on where you live in the world, there might be temples in your area you could go to that will have sessions. But yeah, as much as possible, put it into context. And it's also good to know that with most lineages of Buddhism, it doesn't actually matter if you believe or not. You know, they might request that you have an open mind, but it's not a requirement. You can be a secular Buddhist and be very devout. I would call myself a secular Buddhist. I don't actually think there's anything after we die. I think it would be cool, which kind of makes me a bad Buddhist, but I think that is not the point. For me, becoming a Buddhist monk was about um, immersing myself in a particular way of experiencing reality. I wanted to know the rituals. I wanted to put myself into that extreme sort of situation. And I wanted to learn a different way of sort of like interacting with myself, with the world, with other people, different ways of helping people. There are a lot of reasons for it beyond this. And I still do all of the like daily prostrations in front of the Buddha and like make offerings to the Buddha and all of this stuff. And it's, yeah, anyway, this is just to say if you want to get into meditation, you don't have to be a Buddhist, but I recommend learning it from Buddhist monks because it'll be better. It'll probably help you more. Okay. Listening to music and focusing intently on the words or tune can also help break you out of your thoughts, at least temporarily, Dr. Mark said. Other diversion tactics like talking with a friend, playing a game, or exercising can also help. I find that exercising helps with so many things, but does not help me with rumination because I'm still able to ruminate while I like go running or something. And in fact, I'm more likely to just like run harder if I'm like ruminating about something I'm angry about or whatever. And you're absolutely right, Rodin. It has become a buzzword for sure. Okay, next, avoid your triggers. So this here is not the word trigger being used in the same way as like PTSD triggers. This is the things that just like bring about or are likely to bring about rumination. If watching a Hallmark movie brings up overwhelming memories of the loss of a family member, or if scrolling through social media leads to an unhealthy fixation on your appearance, avoiding those triggers can help interrupt such thoughts, said Jody Louise Russell, a doctoral student who studies the philosophy of rumination in depression and anxiety at the University of Edinburgh. Use the mute, block, unfollow, or not interested function on social media liberally, or avoid the internet or certain types of media altogether if you find that they're doing more harm than good. So I would say here, this is a really important thing because there's a lot of evidence that social media in general can cause us to ruminate, even subconsciously. And seeing all of these like people they took like 500 photos of the same thing till they got the one that makes them look the most sculpted or the most, like bootylicious or whatever is the slim, thick influencer thing to have of the day. Or now I think it's swinging in the other direction where everyone wants to be like as skinny as possible. It's because when the target for the ideal body is a constant moving target, nobody's ever going to be able to land on a feeling of security within social acceptance. And it's one of those things that it's really easy for us to see these pictures and immediately compare our experience of our own lives. And we don't see everything that goes on behind that. that. We don't see the fact that they took the 500 pictures and they edited it and retouched it and they were posed perfectly and they know how to work light and angles, and that it's like their job to look that way and that they actually don't look that way all the time. Um, and it's really easy to get a distorted view of what it's supposed to be. And remember, one of the things that's the real hallmark of like depressive thinking, but also just like thinking that's not very good for us in general, is when we take ourselves out of context. And so if I'm looking at a picture of like a perfectly airbrushed Instagram model and I take both that picture and myself out of the context of what do the people I see every day actually look like? And what do I know about what it takes to achieve this kind of photograph? It's really easy for me to start to feel like I don't measure up. And then it's really easy for me to start to ruminate about all the different ways in which, oh, I shouldn't have eaten this one thing. And why did I skip going to the gym that day? And like, I could look like this if only, if only, if only. And then we can get into the cognitive distortions of like overgeneralizing, shoulding ourselves, all of that. And, you know, it's really, really not good for us. The same is like I block mentions of people that I used to be friends with, but I had like really, you know, not fun falling outs with, because I know that if I see this person's picture, say, come up in a group photo with someone I am still friends with, or people mention them, or like, you know, whatever, or I see certain things being said about them or about me on social media, it can really put me into a rumination spiral. And I can get really into overgeneralizing really quickly and start to feel like all these people who've like done me dirty are always going to be the ones who are seen as cooler and more successful and like better looking or whatever, because the world is fundamentally cruel and unjust. And that's just a lot of cognitive distortions and a lot of like projecting and a lot of making assumptions about what that person's experience of their life is. And also just like assigning intense meaning and value to the particular types of accomplishments this person does or doesn't have. Um, you know, I think about this person who like I used to be friends with. They stole a bunch of my stuff and also a lot of my ideas for art projects. And then they went and like made bad facsimiles of them and they won a human rights award for it. And this person was also incredibly abusive to me. And I was just like, oh my God, that was a lot. And so anytime I saw this person come up on social media, it just became this thing. And I had to make sure I blocked them and that Charlie blocked them and that anybody who was like, say, going to be taking pictures at my wedding had blocked this person. Because I also was in a rumination spiral of like, if this person sees these pictures of my wedding, I know they're just going to think about how, you know, like unattractive I am and how I don't measure up and how, because they were always on me. Like I had heart surgery and I gained some weight. And the person was just like, I can't even look at you anymore because you've gained weight. And I was just like, this is like so bad for my mental health. So I like did not want to get into rumination. I didn't want to like spend my wedding day just thinking about how all the things I could imagine this person thinking negatively about me if they saw any of the pictures. And so I was like, we got to make sure this person is blocked in every way, shape, and form. Otherwise, this is just going to ruin my day. And this is all the same person. Like, you know, somebody I was friends with a long time ago. Thankfully, not friends with him anymore. We'll probably never have to see this person or interact with them in any way, shape, or form ever again. And that's a person I have to be really careful about when I realize I've been reminded of them in some way, because there's so many things about that friendship that I can ruminate about. And so many ways I can just get into these spirals. And then that also makes it so that it's harder for me to feel good and confident about current friendships that I have, because I can just think like, if this person who had been one of the best friends I'd ever had in my life, which is like depressing in and of itself, but also like there was a time when it was actually a good friendship, could like just turn out to be such a terrible person to me and like treat me in these really horrific ways, then how can I ever trust anybody? And that's right back to overgeneralization, right? I have to be so careful. Um, Jan, you said replying to a Rodden, COVID actually made me delete my Twitter. I wanted to delete it anyway, but the whole misinformation spread was the final drop. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Online misinformation is just, hmm. Anyway, so don't be afraid to just like mute people. Like there are people who I'm still friends with on social media, especially Facebook, but who I know are going to just like talk about things that are, if I see them come up, are going to just put me into this headspace I don't want to be in. So I don't follow them on Facebook, for example. So we're still friends. So we can message each other and they can like know about my life and whatever. And like if I need to contact them, I can. But I don't need to be reminded of these things that I know are going to make me feel bad. Okay. Next, set a worry timer. When you're ruminating, it's possible to get stuck in a feedback loop where you feel bad about ruminating, which in itself can lead to more rumination and deepened feelings of distress. This is also incredibly common in things like depression. It's really, really, really common for us to be depressed and then start, or I do this with migraines actually. I can get into a rumination about my migraines and just be like, how much of my life will be stolen by these headaches, especially when it gets into like the really bad, like 5 days out of the week, I have a migraine and I can just be like, my whole life will just be suffering. I should have like, and there's like research that says that every migraine you get makes your brain more sensitized to get future migraines. And like, this is just going to be my future. And I should have just like done these things differently when I was a kid so then I could have reduced the risk and intensity and like, you know, how it goes. And then I can start to be like, oh, I'm ruminating. And now I feel even worse. It's rough. Okay. Setting aside 10 to 30 minutes of dedicated worry or ruminate time periodically can help relieve that pressure. Even the simple act of giving yourself permission to ruminate can help you feel more relaxed, Dr. Siegel said. Adding an activity like writing in your journal can also be cathartic and help to clarify and diffuse your emotions, Dr. Mark said. And this is also one of these things that anytime we talk about like emotional regulation skills or like emotional health skills, I guess health is okay to use here, even though I have mixed feelings about that word. I want to make it clear, I'm never saying like gaslight yourself. I'm not saying like invalidate your own life experience. I'm saying everything in balance, right? Not necessarily everything in moderation, because moderation is not necessarily the same as balance. So just a thought. Clipper, you said, also hi Clipper, reminds me of how I had to block a bunch of people on FetLife to not be reminded of the community I had a really bad falling out with. It was and still is super upsetting to see posts about that community. Exactly. And so this is not necessarily in and of itself rumination or even like trauma being triggered or anything. It could be, but just like this example is really good of knowing that this is going to just put you into a bad headspace. It's going to be upsetting. You're not going to feel great. And then stopping yourself or reducing the risk of this coming up is how we can prevent some of this. Okay. It does still lead me to ruminate. I'm working on it. It also takes time. It takes time. You've also got to process the falling out, right? I remember like many years ago, I realized that I was a chronic ruminator and I'd ruminate about like the most recent thing that had really like sort of hurt me or like my most recent breakup or like whatever. And I had a thought one time where I was just like, I'm so tired of ruminating about this person. I can't wait to have like my next big drama so I can start to ruminate about the new thing instead. And then I was just like, oh, that hurts. That thought is rough. And it also made me realize that a lot of the time I didn't really fully process and like work through and let go of the things that had really upset me. And not just let go, but like integrate the experience, right? And that was actually going to make it more likely that when things went wrong, I was going to ruminate because I just never I never finished the processing, right? Okay. Um, Immerse yourself in the moment. Sometimes people ruminate about things that happened in the past or that will happen in the future and which have no immediate solutions. To get yourself out of that unproductive thought pattern, Dr. Mark said, take a moment to notice everything that is happening around you, such as what you see in front of you, what's the temperature in the room, is there anything you can smell in the air? Take whatever experience you're in and completely immerse yourself. Serious rumination might need therapy. And also, like, spoiler alert, that's also what I did, right? Like, to get to the point where I could stop some of the most intense ruminations that I have and keep them at these lower intensity ones and use skills to sort of offset them when I catch myself doing them. Therapy really helped me with that. Well, the strategies above may be helpful for some people. Those who ruminate and also have certain mental illnesses, such as severe OCD, will need more regimented intervention, some experts said. If your rumination gets to a near constant state, it would be unrealistic for you to try to be distracted or mindful all the time, Dr. Greenberg said. Well, like constantly trying to swat at a fly or hold a balloon underwater. And distracting yourself can sometimes backfire. If you tell yourself not to think of a pink elephant, for example, you're going to want to think of a pink elephant, and it won't get to the root of the problem or why you're ruminating in the first place. Instead, Dr. Greenberg teaches people how to let go of those thoughts while still acknowledging that they exist. Your job, he said, is to stop trying to figure out the problem. When you tell yourself that you do not need to resolve the issue and you believe that it's okay to refrain from trying to find a solution, that's often when your brain can let go. It should feel like a release. So this is one of those things that is also important if I think about just like rumination's impact on friendship and also things like activism. When things go wrong, we can often feel like we are the ones who have to fix it. And this is one of the things that we might not even realize we have this thought, but it's very, very common where we can just like over ascribe responsibility to ourselves for managing, offsetting, fixing a problem. And that can lead into like saviorism, one true wayism, some of these really like negative things that really, make us less actually effective over time. But it also can make it so that we are less likely to want to be collaborative with other people. And it can make it so that we feel like we know the one solution. Yeah, this is the way. And it makes it really, really hard to also still stay resilient in a lot of these spaces. If something really goes wrong, sometimes something just went wrong. Sometimes it was just a miscommunication. Sometimes this bill was just not going to pass because, the council you were putting it forward to or your proposal or whatever was just never going to be popular. It's too, you didn't have the resources to speak to those people enough. You didn't have the connection. You didn't have the thing. But it was still worth trying, right? Because you're still going to have learned things. You're still going to have gotten certain skills from it. And we want to make sure we don't get so stuck in ruminating about why it failed, which is not to say you can't like do a debrief afterwards, because those can be really important. But a debrief is not the same thing as a rumination spiral. But a rumination spiral, especially if you get into it as a group of people together, you can really defang a friendship or a political movement or an activist group really, really, really quickly by feeling like all of our efforts are for naught. So sometimes it's important to just say, we did everything we could, and that's fine. Aradini said, this is one of the reasons I often hated group projects in school. Yeah, I think there's a lot about group projects that can go wrong, mostly because they don't really teach people skills of how to do a group project at all, and like how to communicate, how to delegate, how to sort of hold each other accountable. And there's often very little way to hold each other accountable, so you just end up having like the one or two kids who are taking responsibility doing everything. Because it's a group grade or whatever. There's ways for group work and group projects to be really good, but I think a lot of the time the way they're implemented doesn't actually serve a very big pedagogical function, and doesn't teach the lessons that people think that they're teaching. Anyway, setting that aside, you don't need to visualize anything. You don't need to do anything. You just stop engaging. While that may sound like a confusing directive, it is something anyone can learn, he said, usually with a bit of practice. Dr. Siegel also noted that treating rumination and treating underlying mental health conditions often go hand in hand. Therapies for conditions like OCD, anxiety, and certain types of depression, which can include cognitive behavioral therapy, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, light therapy, or writing out your feelings, are all useful in reducing rumination. So I really want to come back to this. I want, even if you don't have severe rumination, I still think it's good to recognize that sometimes your job is to stop trying to figure out the problem. Just accept that things did not go well, and that's okay. This is one of those things, for example, I used to get bullied a lot, but I also had like more lower intensity general social exclusion for many different reasons. A lot of it comes down to ADHD and really just being told that I needed to fundamentally change my personality to be acceptable. And I used to really ruminate on like, oh, did I talk too much? Did I overshare? Was I too loud? And like, yes, to a certain degree, these were skills that I needed to learn to be able to just like baseline function in society. I needed to learn how to do things like wait my turn, raise my hand, not just like do whatever impulsive thing I felt like doing every moment of the day, to be a good listener. Like there were some things that were like genuinely skills I needed to learn in order to function. And then other things, like the fact that I'm still silly and playful, the fact that I'm capable of, experiencing a lot of different types of play and fun, and I didn't beat it out of myself. The fact that I'm, goofy and stuff. These were things that I was also told I needed to change, and it was really easy for me to ruminate about why I wasn't better or different. And then at one point, I was just like, you know what? This is just who I am. You always want to be careful with this because we can go way too far in either direction. We can go way too far in the direction of this is just who I am. When I was a little kid, I took that advice way too far and would do things like fart all the time in front of other kids, or like pick my nose or whatever. And I was just like, that's who I am. I just got to accept myself, and other people need to accept me too. Kind of a ridiculous thought. This was like first, second grade. But then, those were things that I could take that thought way too far, but I did not want to like kill off the parts of myself that I genuinely liked. So one of the things I did was like, look at, here are the personality traits that people tell me they don't like about me. Am I getting something from them? Is the thing that I get from them greater than what I might get if I stopped doing them? And if the answer is yes, I'm not going to change this thing about myself. I might learn how to like selectively bring it out in front of other people. And other things I'm just not going to try to change, right? There are some things like certain aspects of my goofiness and playfulness I can't bring out in the workplace, for example. So I did have to learn how to selectively bring it out. Okay. But, like being engaged, being really enthusiastic, being really talkative, for the most part, I'm not going to try to change those things about myself. I like them just fine. All right. So try this. Try figuring out the balance between what is worth trying to fix or change and what is worth just accepting, and just practice it. Just tell yourself that you don't need to resolve the issue, especially not every issue. Yeah, I agree, Aradin. For sure, things like people trying to say like their racism or their sexism is just who they are. Yeah, no. All right. Rumination is not all bad. This is the other thing, and this is one of the things I've been sort of building to, but it's still really important. Sometimes rumination is an important tool. As Jan, I know you mentioned earlier in the stream, that sometimes rumination has helped you. At the end of the day, spending time thinking about issues or ideas is not always unhealthy, Dr. Siegel said. In some cases, ruminating with a friend can foster a closer bond, or perhaps it can prompt you to leave a stressful job or confront a bad friend. There's potentially a lot of sort of secondary gain that can come from rumination, depending on how you use it, he said. What matters most when it comes to rumination is how your thinking makes you feel, Dr. Mark said. If your thoughts are causing distress, anger, or anxiety, or if they're getting you into cognitive distortions, or if your rumination is pulling you away from the important things in your life, that is when it's a problem. Okay, so here there's a correction. Dr. Humor did not use the pink elephant example. Okay. They misattributed it to the wrong person. Anyway, I'm going to put this in the chat again so everybody can check it out on their own if they want to look at it. And I really want to say there's a common problem that happens with this is not exactly a self-help stream. It's like a consent practice stream. But any of these streams or YouTubers or vloggers or whatever who aim to sort of promote skills that can help with us leading a better life or whatever, it's really easy to binge watch a bunch of it and then literally nothing in your life changes. So every once in a while, I really like to try to think about what are some concrete small things that you can, if you want to, implement in your life this week and try to practice and try to maintain. So remember a long time ago when we were first talking about friendship and also friendship's effect on our sense of well-being, trying to just pick one or two people a week and just send them a text message that says thinking of you, or just send them a meme, or just said hey, I hope everything's going well for you, and leave it at that, or send them just a nice, sweet, small message. Yeah, the GIF is a bit much. Thank you, Paladin Hulk. I was thinking that I should move it, and I'm glad that you gave me the push. Anyway, we want to actually do something with this information. I don't want people to just come here and be like, yeah, these are great ideas, and then never implement them, right? And it's one of the reasons why I've been making these daily consent practice posts. And I don't do them every day. I'm trying to do them about twice a week because I don't have the time to actually make these pretty graphics and stuff every day. But small ways in which we can just start to slowly improve things like consent practices, including our consent practices with ourselves, right? So one of the things that we can do here is really practice doing things like feeling your feelings. A lot of us tend to squish our feelings down, and I think that leads to more rumination because at some point they have to be processed, right? If we never actually come to terms with how we feel about something, we're going to just stay stuck in a kind of limbo. So what I recommend is first, don't just push away every feeling you have. If it becomes too overwhelming, if it becomes really, not good, then we can do these skills try to distract ourselves. But first, just start by allowing yourself to feel your feelings, right? So earlier today, when I caught myself ruminating, I didn't try to stop myself from feeling the emotions I was having, but I did take time to recognize that I was having them and name them and then think about why I was having that feeling. And, I thought about, do I feel like I've got a lot of unprocessed pent up anger in my life? No. I think that there are just things that every once in a while make me feel kind of powerless or dismissed or not taken really seriously. That's something that I can be kind of sensitive to, and that's okay. So I just let myself be yeah, this small interaction with my family frustrated me in this way. It doesn't mean that it's every interaction I have with them. So that's the next thing is I let myself feel my feelings. I was able to name them, identify them, I let myself just sit with them for a little while. I kind of thought about what the root is of them. And then I made sure that I took some time to put them into context. This is not every interaction that I have with my family members. In fact, it's very rare that this happens. And it's okay that sometimes an interaction with my family members is frustrating. And just being able to practice letting yourself feel what you're feeling, being able to identify it and name it, is a really good place to start. Paladin Hulk, bottling up your feelings end up like pop champagne bottles, but without the celebration. Yeah. And I mean, like, it's not good for you. There's also a lot of research that shows that like bottling up your feelings can lead to greater risks of like heart attack and everything. So like, it's a good thing for us to all to practice. So this is what I recommend starting with is like really just figuring out what are you feeling? And you might think I already am pretty in touch with my emotions, and you might be, but there's always more we can do to get in touch with our feelings. Paladin Hulk. This anger is an excellent vintage. Oh man, yeah, that's pretty funny. So it's just give yourself some time with that. Think about now, like how you want to implement it. So what I like to do is, at least 3 times a day, usually breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because it's really easy for me to pair it with those 3 things because they're like essentially scripted events that always happen, is scan my body and scan for physical sensations, but also emotional things, and scan what's going on with my mind, and then just sort of take stock of it a little bit. Start to name things. Don't label them good or bad. Don't get into the habit of like being mad at myself for something. But yeah, just doing some body scanning. So think about for you how you would like to implement this week. And I really want to start with something super small because again, it's really easy for me to come on here and just say like, here's this big advice, try all these things. But the thing is that you're not likely to do any of that because it's a lot, right? It's a lot to change that much about your life, right? So it takes a lot of time. So I really recommend just starting small things and try to make, if you're interested in it, a commitment to yourself to saying, I'm going to try this one thing of like just slowly practicing scanning my body and identifying the feelings and sensations I'm having, labeling them, like naming them, and then just letting myself experience them. And then, once you get good at that, you can start to ask yourself things like, is this what I want to be feeling? Do I want to change anything? But we can get to that later at another time in the future. We'll talk a lot more about like emotional skills. But yeah, I think that is the lesson for today. Just practice something small as a way to be good to yourself. Be kind to yourself. And one of the ways to do that is to really invest in having a deep emotional connection to yourself. This also is important for consent. There is internal consent, and it's a lot harder for us to know also externally whether or not we want to consent to something if we're really disconnected from what's going on inside of us. So anyway, as an aside, I've got a little bit of a Reddit thing to look at. I'll paste this in the chat, and it was an interesting discussion from 4 months ago, but what was an immediate friendship ender for you? And I think that this is also stuff where we should think about what patterns we see in this. Yeah, Clipper, I agree. The connection from mindfulness to or awareness to internal consent is really interesting. Absolutely. So it's also really easy. I think it's good to look at this and also think about how do these friendship enders also apply to relationships that aren't friendships, like community, like, being part of an organization, like any kind of activism you might be doing with other people. So this first one was, they remember I'm their friend only when they need something from me. So this is a lack of reciprocity, right? Very one-sided. But we also would want to think about in any kind of org or structure or community group, are there people who are constantly just asked to give without things necessarily being given back to them, right? If there's somebody, say, in an org that always makes sure that there's like food and water at your events, is time actually taken to really highlight this person's efforts? Is thanks given? Are people making sure that they supply other things that that person needs, for example? And really thinking about reciprocity. All right, this next one, commissioned an art piece, went over exact details of what it was supposed to be. I even supplied some of the materials. We discussed price and agreed on 350. The piece turned out basically as expected. The issue when I went to pay him, he changed his mind on the spot, or at least without telling me beforehand. I had taken out 400 from my bank to cover the cost of the art, and I needed $20 to pay back a friend who would also be there. I saw the friend first, so I had a total of 380 in cash on me. I should be fine, right? Well, I was actually thinking 600, he said. So I told him that's not what we agreed on, and I'm simply not paying it. It's not something he's going to be able to sell to somebody else. It has my materials in it. We go back and forth, and I get him down to 400, but I only have 380 with me. I give him that. He gives me the piece. I never talk to him again. So this is basically poor consent practice. Somewhere in this process, the negotiation of consent, what they were agreeing to, went really wrong. And yeah, that rumination crops up right here as well, or just like strong unhappy associations. It feels bad to think you will remember this story every time you see it. Yep. All right. So let's continue. What are some other things? Unrequited debts spoil relationships very well. Yeah, this one is the one I would agree with. Don't loan money to friends, just give it to them. If you're loaning money to a friend and genuinely expecting it to be paid back to you, you're probably going to set yourself up for disappointed. It's nice if they do, but you're way better off only ever lending money to friends where you're actually just giving it to them and it's something you can afford, right? If this is not, if a friend came and asked me for 10 grand, I might be able to scrape that together if they give me a little bit of time, but I would need that money back. I would not be able to just like lose 10 grand and be okay. And so if that was the case, if a friend came and asked me for 10 grand, I should not loan that to them because of the fact that I should only really do it if it's a thing where like I really can handle what it would mean if that money doesn't come back. And this is also true for any kind of organization or group efforts. Like when people share things that they own or give of things, it really needs to be done with the understanding that you might not get repaid in the ways you expect. I do want to be your friend, Krellin, but I don't have money to give to you. Clipper, my best friend and I take turns paying for stuff, and we don't even exactly track whose turn it is. Occasionally, we do some repayment, but most of the time, it's just it'll even out. And I think that's a way less stressful way to do it. I had a friend once who like I went for. They asked me if I wanted to. We went out to dinner. We split the bill 50-50. It was really cheap. It was just like some like this was when I was a university student. It was just like one of the like campus little places. We basically got like street food, and then they said, "Oh, do you want to come back to my place and we can have some wine and like watch this movie together and stuff?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah, that sounds really nice." And after I left, they texted me a PayPal payment request for the like $8.17 worth of the wine that I drank, and I was like, "That's insane." And this person came from way more money than me, and I was very, very surprised. And I just didn't go back over their place. I was like, this is weird. Um, anyway, I just quit calling, and guess what? They never called me. So, Clipper, you said it really reduces the stress, but it also helps that we can both afford to be a bit loose with the smallish amounts of money. Paladin Hulk, I did pay the money. I did talk to them about it as well first. They were very, very insistent. And I said, basically, that's weird. Very much not within my cultural norms, and we're from the same culture. Where do you get this sort of way of thinking? And basically, they were just like, if I constantly just like let people take advantage of me financially, people just like try to come after rich people, blah, 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 and like get money from us. And I was like, okay, so you can either have your 817 or you can have my friendship. I wasn't that hostile with what I said, but I was still really clear about it. And They were like, no, you should pay me back. And I was like, okay, cool. Um, I'll just give you an equal amount of wine, pour it out over your front porch. It's not even like it was fancy wine or anything. It was like something from like the liquor store on the edge of campus. Anyway, so I want to talk about this one here because this one's, I think, a really common thing. And the thing is, sometimes this is an indication of a truly unequal relationship where there's not a lot of reciprocity or mutual investment. And sometimes people get into habits and patterns and don't even realize it. So I quit calling, and guess what? They never called me. So this is also one of those things where, like, you can't expect people to read your mind. If you've noticed that there's an inequality in the relationship, you can't expect that people are just going to also notice that too. You really got to talk to them about it. Okay. So this can lead to a lot of hurt feelings. What I recommend doing is just being honest about it. Just saying, like, hey, I noticed that it's only ever me who calls, right? Is there a reason why you don't really call? Can we talk about it? And that would be a really, just good way to start. One second. Charlie just messaged me. Oh yeah, also my mom just messaged me and asked me how my butt is because I told her that yesterday, without meaning to, I accidentally ate a half a bag of prunes, which was a lot of prunes, and it was a little bit of like chemical warfare on my guts. My mom is very funny. Okay, and that is TMI. I'm sorry, but also not sorry. This is just who I am. Paladin Hulk, I hate calling people, so if someone wants me to call them, they probably just in for disappointment. Exactly. That's the thing. Is like, you know, it's really, really easy for there to also be things that are just like natural imbalances in a relationship that are not necessarily because anything is wrong. Right? So like Charlie and I in our division of chores. For example, at first glance, it might seem like Charlie does 10,000% more chores than I do. Charlie's a lot better at making sure certain things get done. Like he's more likely to vacuum, he's more likely to do the laundry. I always help with it. If he says like, "Hey, I'm out of socks" or something, he will do it. But I'm the kind of person who often doesn't do that kind of like when I live alone, won't do that kind of chore until I realize like, oh, I'm like out of clean shirts or something. I'll wash more tonight. And that's kind of just how my brain works for like the thing that triggers my awareness. And Charlie often takes care of these things before I get to that threshold. However, I'm the kind of person who's way, way, way more more likely to be like hypersensitive to certain types of dirt and grime. So like I always notice like if I go to somebody's house, like is their bathroom mirror covered with like gunk? Do the light switches in a person's house like have a bunch of like hand oil all around them? Are the door handles really gross to touch? And I'm the kind of person who's like, I am really down to like spend 3 hours in the shower, like really scrubbing the grout in between all the tiles with a toothbrush and like getting really in there. And now these are chores that take a ton of time and energy, but don't require to be done as often. But I'm a lot better at getting into this like hyper fixation flow state with cleaning and just like really I can like okay, our pantry has gotten messy. I'm going to spend an hour and completely reorganize it, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's one of those things where if we were to just look at it at a glance, it would seem like it was really an unequal relationship in that way. And there are times where things do swing a little bit too far in one direction or the other. They're like, sometimes I'm doing way more chores than Charlie. Sometimes Charlie's doing way more chores than me. And we always, when it comes up, we name it, we talk about it, we recalibrate, right? Totally fine. And this is to say, in any relationship of any kind, there are going to be things that are strengths and weaknesses. Ash, right? Like my co-director, she is really good at doing the budget and profit and loss stuff every year for our boss or every month for our boss. I could do those things. I could learn how to do those things, but it is physically painful for me to do those things. And so she does them. Whereas on the flip side, I'm way more comfortable being here doing massive outreach every week, twice a week, like, looking, getting dressed up for the camera and performing. And she is much more reserved than I am as a person. I'm a lot more comfortable, like, cold emailing people. I'm a lot more comfortable, when people start to get angry about something we post on social media. The drama actually just makes me laugh, right? I just go, ha ha ha, engagement. Like, I don't get upset by it. Very rarely do some social media comments like make me upset. Um, uh, I could talk with my boss palette and talk about dealing with loss. Yes, but making that spreadsheet and making the report from it and stuff is not my forte. So Ash and I really spent a lot of time before we got this job, like looking at when we were applying for it, like the list of all the responsibilities and going through and estimating how much time they take, dividing them up between us, deciding which ones we would both do, which ones would just be me, which ones would just be her, and trying to make it as much as possible so that like the time it was going to take was about even, but it's not always possible because some months are way busier for certain tasks than others. And like, with the exception of when I'm like really sick or I have a schedule conflict, always having my Sunday evenings be, for the stream means that I'm working every weekend, right? I already work every weekend, so there's always stuff to do. I work every day of the week, but I love my job, so I don't actually care. But like, it's still something that I have to be really mindful of because I don't want to burn out, right? But we worked really hard to create division to make sure that there wasn't going to be the ability for resentment to build up. And we talk about it when like one of us knows that we've dropped the ball on something. So when there is some imbalance in a relationship, don't just expect the other person to notice because you noticed. Like, people are busy, people don't pay that much attention, people are not that self-aware. Just talk about it. Just talk about it. Okay, I see there was a bunch of comments. I'm going to back up. Clipper, if I want to talk to someone, I call them. I can't expect them to do that for me and vice versa. I'm super glad I called an old friend a few weeks ago. We hadn't talked in many years, and it turns out we both just had a lot on our plates and didn't manage to make space for calling. Within a few minutes of talking, we were back to feeling as close as where we left off. It was great. Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Jan, and calling friends in order to hang out via Discord or so feels extra bad because I always feel like I'm a beggar. Hang out with me, please. Yeah, that being said, like, I don't mind asking people to hang out with me, please. Like, I've got people that, yeah, I just want to be friends with, and I'll just be like, can we hang out? I try to invite them to stuff instead, but yeah, anyway. Krellin, it is the responsibility of the person with the highest standard of clean to do the cleaning. They can request help, but not passive aggressively. Yeah, I would say that, like, aside from like the daily life tasks that really have to get done, like, I unload the dishwasher every morning and reload it, and then we start it at night. And that's something that like I am happy to take care of because I don't like things to be dirty and like for there to be lots of fruit flies and stuff. Charlie is much more likely to get up earlier than I am on a Saturday and be like, okay, I'm going to go take the recycling out or something and take the compost out and stuff. Like, these are things that we both have to do, but we've divided them up. But like, if Charlie didn't care about like there not being a bunch of soap scum in the shower or whatever, yeah, I mean he does, but like I'm the one who's like way more likely to be down to like just be scrubbing in there for several hours. Like, I put a radio show on or maybe a podcast and then I just do it. Anyway, Rodden, yeah, I had that issue a lot with friends, compounded by the fact that even if I want to reach out to people, I feel like I'm imposing on them and bothering simply by interacting with them. Yeah, that's rough. Rodden, Clipper, you said Rodden, I feel like that too often. In this instance, I had the excuse that it was that friend's birthday that helped me make the call anyway. Aradin, that explains why Ash hasn't been on the streams for a while. Also, she's busy a lot. And Jan, you said it ain't about the people for me. I usually call my sis and a friend of us, but I know A, my sis has it hard mentally and therefore is rarely available. And B, our friend is only at home on the weekend and therefore I can fairly understand if he has other plans for the 48 hours he has there. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, okay, so let's continue a little bit. The friendship became all about them. That person would never ask how I was actually doing. They would just immediately launch into their problems. It's all we ever talked about, and it was so toxic, so I ended it. Um, I will let Ash know, Aradin. So I think that this is also an example of like make sure that the person or people who are giving in a situation also get things back now and then. This is really true for organizations and groups, as well as friendships. You can really easily bleed somebody dry emotionally by just allowing them to be constantly giving and not actually getting anything back from the community or the friendship. Um, okay. Let's see. Breaking up with my ex, I thought they were our friends, but no, just theirs. That's rough. Being there for them when their world fell apart and supporting them for 4 years of getting their life back together, spending amounts and amounts of time with them and building them up when they tried again and again to fall back down. When my life went to shit, didn't even get a week from them, friendship over. Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those things where it's like, I think it's important, just like with lending money, when you're lending help, to not expect necessarily to get it back. And if you really want that, to have clear agreements with that person, really talk about it and talk about what you would want that to look like. And when you're helping a friend, not in a way that's meant to guilt them or to kind of lord it over them or anything, but just be clear with, hey, just so you know, like, these are the things I'm able to help you with. This is the stuff I'm doing. Not like, here's all the stuff I'm doing for you, but like, hey, just so you know, this is what my capacity is at. And regularly naming it. So that way it's clear to them all of the help that you've given them. But yeah, exactly, Rod. And keeping score really can become a real detriment. It's something that really allows resentment to build up. And as we've talked about over the last few weeks, resentment is really bad for you, especially when it gets into its more extreme forms. And yeah, it really just becomes bad for your own mental health. Yeah. All right. Went shopping in high school. She stole some makeup and put it in my bag. I was the one who walked out with it and luckily didn't get caught. I felt bad when she explained she had no money. Then I went over her house maybe 4 months later and found my missing iPod, showing my age at her house. That pretty much did it for me. Yeah, teenagers stealing from each other is an all too common problem. My best friend in middle school stole my PlayStation. I let him borrow it and then left it. He left school and refused to return it. Maybe 6 or 7 years later, I ran into him working at a convenience store and he seemed thrilled to see me. He gave me his number and said he wanted to hang out again. I immediately lost that number and never went back to the store. The next comment, you didn't hang out with him to steal it back. Yeah, missed opportunity. I'm very thirsty today. My goodness. All right. All right. Um, I once had a friend in high school who insisted my ears were not pierced. I showed her my obvious earring holes in my ears, and she said, "No offense, but why would you lie about something so stupid?" Exactly, Jessica. Why the fuck would I? So, anyway, the specific experience was a friendship ender. That's really uh, weird. That's really weird. Yes. This is Volslauer. It's a good, it's the super prickland, so it's like super sparkling. And I put a little lemonade in it because normally the lemonade is like way too sweet for me. So I just add a little bit to it, to the sparkling water. So it's like fizzy lemonade and it's really nice. Yeah, the black is because it's the super prickland. Yeah, it's pretty nice. Pretty nice. All right. So let's just think about this. I want to play a little bit of Stardew Valley. It's been a while. So let's go over to gameplay. I did actually like have in my head that I was going to play 50-50. It's always so funny. I just feel like these things are never going to take very long, but then there's always so much cool stuff to talk about, so it's hard. It's hard. So let's play a little bit of Stardew Valley. And have some fun. All right. I always got to resize it. Oh, maybe that worked out okay. No, it's cut off a little bit. All right. Does that look good? I think so. I think so. All right, let's play this a little bit. Let's just see what's going on here. So, yeah, thinking of rumination in this game. A lot of characters in this game. No, how do I? There we go. Queen of Sauce rerun. Roasted hazelnuts. Wow, nice. Fortune teller. Here the spirits. Somewhat annoyed today. Bummer, bummer. All right. Or we can buy the whole town. Yeah, and then just take care of everybody. Speaking of rumination, though, a lot of characters in this game ruminate a lot. And I think Shane is a great example of that. Shane is a mega ruminator, really ruminates, really hates himself. It's a vicious cycle, I think, that Shane has really gotten himself into, where he ruminates and then feels like he's a bad person for it, and really just like causes him to stay quite disconnected from the people around him. And it's really tough. I think Pam can ruminate a little bit. Who else do we think ruminates? Thank you, Krellin, for doing that. Y'all are so nice. I just, as an aside, like I often think about how much I like hanging out with you all. You're all very nice and supportive, and it's really lovely. And yeah, it's great. It's just great. He needs to wear the cone of shame. That's funny. Oh my goodness. All right. Hello, quackers. Trying to pick up the egg. All right, petting all the animals. I actually like it when it rains in this game because it's a lot easier to make sure you pet all of the animals and like milk them all and stuff. It's I feel like a real advantage. And I know I could just like not let them out. Just like lock their doors, but I feel bad doing that. It is part of being a mod, but I also just like really appreciate my mods being so like on top of things and supportive, and anyway, I feel lucky. Nothing's ready yet. I mean, I could get that, but I don't want to. Interesting, interesting. Look at all these melons. I'm very excited for the future melons. All right, let's go see over here. How's the crops doing? Not bad, not bad. Okay. All right. Last time I was cleaning things up. Yeah, I love the melons. They're like I love making the pink cake. I don't know why. I'm like really obsessed with it, but I am. No. You've never watched someone game before? Oh, that's funny. Well, this is the first time for everything, I suppose. But yeah, when I first started Clipper doing this stream, I would do a lot of Stardew Valley, and we would talk a lot about community consent and autonomy, and sort of like through the lens of the different characters in the town, because this game seems like really cutesy, and it is really cutesy, but there's also a lot of like depth to it, and there are a lot of issues that people deal with, and it's got a lot of good like consent situations to talk about. We don't get into as many of the scenarios because I don't give enough gifts and have enough interactions with all of the town members. All right, still gonna wait until all of these are done before I do anything else. All right, let's put stuff away. We got an egg. Gonna go sell my mayo and my cheese. Put the crafting stuff away. Perfect. All right. Well, I'm not sure what I'm gonna get up to since the spirits are so unhappy. So difficult. I mean, I do just want to go to the skull mines. What else do I need to even do at the community center? Wait. There we go. Let's look at the community center. No, where is it? Somehow I forgot how this interface works. It's kind of silly. I thought there was a way to tell what needed to go. Oh, it's over here. That's it. Okay. I still need a rabbit's foot. I need to get some pet rabbits. I still need a truffle. Oh, that I should have. Is that it? Okay. All right, well, let's go get a truffle and bring that to the community center. I should have that. Yep, I do. All right, no rabbit's foot yet, though, because I don't have pet rabbits. I don't think. We should save up for another barn and just get a bunch of rabbits. I didn't realize we were so close to completing the community center. Very nice. So, thinking about this, ruminating. I think that, you know, for example, the main character, we've got this whole sort of story about, you know, your grandfather dying and you inherited this area. I think it's really easy when we lose, like, say, a family member to ruminate about how much we could have spent more time with them. Oh, yeah, pink cake. Amazing. So, really, all I need left is a rabbit's foot. Is that really it? And then it's all completed? Did I get all the fish? No way I got all the fish. I'm so surprised. Wow. Wow, wow. Okay. Well, you know, it's really easy, I think, to ruminate about that and to sort of regret. I saw that a lot when my friend died. People really got stuck sort of ruminating about, like, what if this, what if that? Scorpion carp? I don't think so. I can't just bring you a scorpion carp out of nowhere. All right, let's go see Haley and give her a pink cake. Oh, we got a scene. Haley says, I always clean these cushions. It's your turn this week. Well, well, well. What an appropriate scenario. Emily's upset. You're being childish, Haley. I do the vast majority of the work in this house, and you know it. Oh, it's that new girl from the farm. She has a name, you know. Thank you, Emily. Hey, I bet you'll understand my point of view here, says Haley. Emily, sigh. I'm really sorry to involve you in this, Ariel. Haley is complaining because I asked her to clean under the cushions. It's only because I cleaned them last week. So my options are stop whining and just clean it. Haley, why not have this be your one weekly job? Emily, take the high road and do it this time. I mean, it shouldn't be your one weekly job when you live together. But I'm gonna say that because it's the most diplomatic. Haley, sigh. All right, you win. I guess this can be my job every week. Then there won't be any reason to argue over it. Emily, thanks, Ariel. That was a great solution. I don't know. I feel like it's a pretty mess solution. Oh, a second scene with Haley. I just can't open this jar. Okay, as an aside, if you're ever struggling to open a jar, there is a trick that doesn't need brute strength. You just take like a butter knife and you put it right where the lid contacts the jar and you lift it up a little bit because then you can break the seal just using leverage and then it will open really easily. There you go. Oh, it's you, Ariel, right? Say you're pretty strong, aren't you? Yes. Great, then you shouldn't have any problem opening this jar for me. I got it open, woohoo! Hey, you did it, you're stronger than you look. What? Well, thanks. Well, oh, now we get another scene with Emily. Wow, it's scenes on scenes. She does lean really strongly into the girly tropes, Krillin. I think that's kind of like her character's whole deal. All right, Emily's having a cool, trippy dream. Oh, and now I'm in her dream. Emily says, why are you here? Yeah, good question. Wow, shooting rainbows. Dot, dot, dot. That reminds me of something. Even the tiniest, blandest, simplest light holds a wonderful secret. Now I know why you're here. It's a sign. Ha ha ha. Question mark? Well. Well. Emily wakes up, walking around. Ariel, there's something special about Ariel. Our destinies will intersect. Oh man, another scene. Wow, it's just scenes on scenes today. Okay, great. Everyone has their stone. Because I brought them all the stones. Right. Now close your eyes and take slow, deep breaths. Focus on your lungs. Visualize the pure energy flowing into your body with every breath. And when you exhale, feel all the tension and negative energy flowing out, leaving you more and more relaxed with every breath. Now open your heart to the vibrational frequency of your stone. Do you feel anything? They are, I think, around in summoning Captain Planet. Yeah, Haley's asleep. Looks like the gemstones are put to good use. I guess. All right. So that first scene that we got, though, they just need a relationship agreement, right? Like a roommate relationship agreement. I think they're also sisters. How many hearts do I have with Haley? Only 4. Wow, I got all those scenes. 4. Oh my god, that's my favorite thing. Yeah, I know. I know it's your favorite thing. Hello, I spent all morning doing my hair. Now the rain can mess it up. Sorry, that sucks. Life is hard sometimes. I wouldn't necessarily call that hard, but I suppose the worst that you've ever experienced is the worst that you know. Emily, my friend runs a shop in the desert. If you ever go there, stop in and say hi for me. I think she sells some rare products. Yes, she does. All right. Check the trash. Let's see. So, here it would be really easy for Emily to get into a space of resentment and maybe even contempt with Haley because this doesn't seem to be a very equal relationship, right? She does all this work, all the cleaning. All right, gonna give a pink cake to Jess. Jess, wow, thank you. Yeah, you're adorable. Aunt Marnie won't let me go out after 6 o'clock. It's not fair. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. All right, Marnie, purchase animals. Deluxe coop. So I can't get rabbits, so I get a deluxe coop. Alrighty. Lewis, how many hearts do we have? 3? I'm just here to make sure all of Marnie's business needs are met. Sure you are. You're not here to hanky-panky? I don't buy it. All right. We probably get some stone and chop down some trees because we're going to need to make that deluxe coop, so let's get on it. So it'd be really easy for resentment to build up. And the thing is, and maybe even contempt, right? And it's not that that would be illogical or anything. It's not. Like, that's a very unequal relationship. If Emily does pretty much all the cooking and cleaning, and Haley only ever cleans under the couch cushions, I mean, that's pretty unequal. And from what I remember, I don't really think Haley has much of a job, but Emily does work, and she works nights. And so that's a lot harder on her body. And I think that there would need to be a renegotiation of this roommate situation that they have to make it so it doesn't become, like irreconcilably affected. I'm pretty sure they're sisters, and that can also be tough because there's going to be dynamics from childhood that carry over, especially if the parents really favor Haley or really allowed Haley to get away with things. And this is something they'd want to be mindful of. But the problem is also, we can't just make that happen, right? Like, this is not something that Emily can just, bring Haley to and Haley's just going to do it, right? Haley's got to have some responsibility for actually listening and taking ownership of her space and taking ownership of her sort of responsibilities in a shared space with somebody, and not just allow it by basically inertia to, become so unequal. Haley could also be doing a bit of what's called a bumbler. Bumblers are more often it's a thing that we talk about as how a lot of men deal with things like chores and housework as a way to get the women in their lives to do it, where they intentionally, maybe subconsciously, but still could actually do it well, but they don't do it well so that the other person can do it. My little brother, not my youngest one, but my middle brother did this with me when we were kids. My dad would tell him to wash the dishes. He's 5 years younger than me. He would, yeah, exactly, weaponized incompetence. He would do it really poorly and leave the dishes quite soapy or quite dirty, really obvious. And my dad didn't want to have to make him do it again. He didn't want to deal with it. So I was just the designated dishwasher, basically, which sucked. And still to this day, I hate washing dishes, which is why I always want to have a dishwasher, because we had to do it by hand. It was just, yeah, it was rough. And a lot of the thing that made it that I hated washing dishes so much was just this inequality between how my brother and I were being treated. My brother was being given the allowance to basically be intentionally bad at something and get away with it, and I would never be extended that. And so there might be, Haley is probably doing some of this, for example, just pretending like she doesn't know what something is or how to do something. I get some hardwood just in case. And, you know, that's not fair to Emily. And the thing is the situation can't get better if Haley is like never actually willing to admit that she could do these things and just chooses not to. It could be, you know, there might be some extenuating circumstances that make certain things more difficult for Haley, and there could be structure created around that, right? Like, I have worse ADHD than my partner. I'm more likely to be forgetful about things. But if there was a serious, you know, need for us to like rework how we do our division of chores, we would need to create structure to make sure that I didn't just constantly forget the things that were necessary. We would need, you know, with ADHD, there's a certain amount of like flexibility and grace that would need to be given because there's only so much that it can be helped. There are going to be things that are going to be outside of my control with it. But that being said, there's still ownership I can take, right? It doesn't have to be, I'm stuck. How did I get stuck here? There we go. All right, just gonna go back out the way I came. You know, it's one thing to I don't want to say this. At some point, there are going to be things though that are under somebody's control, and maybe not. It's not easy. Maybe it's not something that works right away. Maybe it's going to take a lot longer to build that structure, and that structure is a lot more fragile, like it's typical with ADHD. Right? Like if anything disrupts my routine, my structure can take like a year or more to come back. And I've learned this the hard way. And so it's really important for me to be really careful about it. And yeah, Rod, and it could be that she just thinks it's beneath her. We don't actually know what her deal is. I think it's more of just like she feels like such a girly girl and is super focused on other things. That's kind of the impression I've gotten from her character, but can't know. All right, what did I get? Nautilus fossil and some bait. Nice. All right, done fishing. Oh, wow, Clipper. Well, congrats on getting your diagnosis. I think that that's really good. I think that if you have ADHD, getting a diagnosis and getting support is really essential. And I know it can be really hard to get a diagnosis, so I want to say congrats. I hope it wasn't like painful news to get, but yeah, I was diagnosed when I was like 8 because I presented very stereotypically the way like boys tend to present, and it was really obvious. And that didn't necessarily make it easier. It didn't necessarily mean I got support when I needed it or anything, but I was diagnosed very young. It was very clear, and both my parents have it. So like the likelihood of me having it was really high. And both my brothers have it. It's just kind of my whole family. We're all just silly in our own ways. And yeah. All right. How much do I need to make the deluxe coupe? Oh, I'm out of energy. I'm going to eat this plum. And this blackberry. Let's see. I can drink this cola even though it does nothing for me. Clipper, what got me to finally get tested was seeing it happen all around me and being told ADHD people travel in packs. If all your friends have ADHD, I have news for you. It's true. It's the same is true with any sort of mental health condition. People with any sort of difference, including mental health conditions, tend to congregate together. So if like all your friends have depression, you might want to get evaluated for certain things, etc., etc. It doesn't necessarily mean it, but statistically, yeah, it's a lot more likely. All right. Wow, it is late. It's late. I don't have a phone. Right. I wanted to be able to call Robin and ask, like, what do I need for the deluxe coupe? Oh, level 9 foraging. I can make rain totems. That's exciting. All right, let's do one more day and then I should go. I'm getting really hungry for dinner. But yeah, allowing rumination can be a real pathway to resentment, which can be a real pathway to contempt, which can be a real, it's just bad luck every day, it feels. Spirits are never happy. Wonder why. All right. Yeah, I've been streaming for 2 hours. It's nice though. Oh, Caroline, thank you for the vegetable. All right. Gotta say hello to all the animals. Say hello, 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 hello. Alrighty. Alrighty. Okay, so I gotta go get my pail. So I can do some milking. Let's do the milking. If I were a spirit having to deal with Joja Corp, would I ever be happy? I don't know. Probably not. Probably not. That would be rough. That's everybody. Oh, one more. Consent. Yeah, let's get some milk. Alrighty. Oh, do I ever use my panning hat? I do sometimes, for sure. Not very often, but I do sometimes. It really just depends on, like, is there something to pan in the water? And a lot of the time there isn't. All right, still unhappy spirits. I don't know what is the deal. I could make more kegs, but I don't actually think I want to. Unless I just start growing like blueberries and cranberries and stuff in the greenhouse. Because then that would maybe be kind of useful. I need slime. Make a bunch of field snacks. I'm actually just gonna go to the mines because why not? Why not? Gonna toss these things I don't need in there. I know it's not the most organized, but whatever. I'll be tomorrow, the next time I play, I'll be like, where's this thing? Where's that thing? And it'll be... Anyway, that's fine. That's fine. Rabbit. Helen Hulk, you said, if I was a ghost, it'd be nice knowing talking to me would never get boring. Just nothing but spirited discussions. Oh, you are good with puns, Paladin Hulk. I really like it. All right, let's go to 40. I don't even know what this is, but let's just do it. I need slime. Nothing. Bummer. All right, well, stone is still useful. No slimes. Where am I at on the skill tree? No, that's not the right thing. All right, everything is at 10 except foraging and combat. All right, well, that's not bad. Clipper, you said ADHD observation. Just watching and listening to this part of the stream seems kind of work to like body doubling for me. I'll have to try that more often if it works. That'd be super helpful. Nice, nice. That's good. Yeah. All right, hopefully we can level up some combat. Oh my gosh, getting stuck on the thing. So yeah, thinking about that interaction we saw with Emily and Haley, that is a place where it would be really easy to get ruminating after that kind of argument, where if it didn't go well, I might start thinking like, this is so unfair. Why is Haley so immature? Why can't she just do chores? My whole life is like this. Like I can get into that overgeneralization mindset so fast. It is definitely one of my bad habits when it comes to cognitive distortions. Is I can start to be like never, or always, or just like this is so bad, or all kinds of stuff like that. And it's not good for me. So I really try hard to not do it. But if I felt really particularly like dismissed or something, or not taken seriously as a person or whatever, that is a real risk. And so what I would want to do in that situation is one, just take some time to like cool down from it, get some distance from it, and then think about like what is lingering here. So that's one of the other things that I find can be a real trigger for rumination for me is when there's something from a situation that is still lingering that I haven't actually really dealt with. And so here I would think about what is the feeling that's lingering that's keeping this thought like easy for me to go to. And this would probably be just like maybe just exhaustion, just the fact that I'm tired of doing so many chores. Exactly. Do you have to let it linger? Now I'm gonna have that song stuck in my head, Krillin. But like, I'm so exhausted from having to do so many chores, and I feel like that's not acknowledged. And I could also say, like, is it that I need it acknowledged or I need something to change? And if it's that I need something to change, I might need to say to Haley, like, hey, here's the situation, right? I would use the skill that we've talked about a lot. I would describe the situation first, just the facts. Then I would express the impact that it's having on me. Then I would ask for something. So I would start by saying, like, here's the situation. I do, these are all the chores that I do. This is the chore that you do. This is the impact that it's having. I'm really exhausted because I work nights. I have this really stressful job, and then having to do all the chores, especially cleaning up after messes I didn't make, makes me feel even more tired, and it makes me feel like, I can't rely on you for things and all these other things, right? And then I would ask, can we renegotiate how the chores are done? Can we set up structure so it's more even and like negotiate on these things? And then, I would reinforce it for why it's going to be a benefit for her. I would say, this, if you're willing to do this with me, we won't have to talk about it again. It won't be, a sore point in our relationship. It will help maintain our relationship. And if the person really refuses, I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm going to go move out and I'm going to find someone else to live with. Because I don't want to be in this situation where I have to, do all the chores and constantly clean up after someone else's mess and not get respected for it or anything. So I might say, like, that would be my negotiation. If she says, no, I don't want to talk about this, screw you, I would say, okay, then either one of us has to move out. We need to find other people to live with. And that might be hard in a small town where there aren't a lot of people moving there, especially probably not a lot of people moving there looking for roommates. But I would rather move into a tiny space and, be a little bit more precarious when it comes to maybe how much savings I can save up because I'm spending more on rent and not have someone live with someone. Oh, a Monster Slayer goal. Not live with someone who like actively makes my life harder. Right? And this is a great example of how things like money and finances are real hindrance when it comes to consent, right? If I don't actually have the ability to live somewhere else because there's no place else available or I don't have the money to leave a bad situation, money can be the difference between being able to actually set a boundary and not. Money can be the difference between access to dignity or not. And this is why housing should be a human right. And like everyone should have automatic access to free housing. If you want to live in someplace fancy, you want whatever, sure, you can get private stuff. But like, anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. All right, I'm still not nearly at 50 slime, despite how many of them I've killed. It's gonna take a while before I can make that press, but that's fine. That's fine. So yeah, you know, I would want to renegotiate this because it wouldn't be okay to just like stay in that situation simply because Haley is being, you know, obstinate about it, with being stubborn, being, you know, unwilling to negotiate. But that's me, you know, I would be willing to live in like a tiny, really meager studio that was like kind of terrible if I was able to also live within my boundaries more and feel more respect than live in a bigger, maybe nicer place, but feel like I had to sacrifice my self-respect a lot. That's just me. But this again also comes to there's three main possible goals in any interpersonal situation. There's the getting what you want, maintaining self-respect, or maintaining the relationship. And when it comes to like long-term things, yeah, commie blocks are good actually. That Adam something video is something I think everyone should watch. Yeah. Maybe I'll make a video. I always want the like video thinkers senpais to notice me. It's pretty silly, but whatever. But maybe I could make one about like commie blocks are good for consent actually, and just like be an update to what Adam something talks about, and just be like what I'm going to talk about from the perspective of consent, and then maybe. Yeah, anyway, it's silly, but you know, whatever. Small goal to have is just to like, I don't want to become like a YouTuber, right, as my career. Like, I'm running a nonprofit. That's like my job. There's a lot more I got to do for that than I wouldn't have time to be like a full-time content creator, right? But as far as like impact hours and outreach and everything, getting more viewers is better. And hopefully it leads to more people taking our classes or buying our book or being exposed to our methodology and just learning more about consent. You know, like my goal with all of this is to it be another form of outreach, right? And more viewers means more outreach. So anyway, setting that aside. Yeah, exactly, Aradin. People can be forced into essentially a form of survival sex work because, like, people will stay in situations that are really not good and relationships that are not good because they don't have the literal financial means to leave. And it's not the way most people sort of like think about sex work, especially survival sex work, but I would say that in its way, it is essentially a form of human trafficking. There have been some really good articles written on it as well. And I have talked to a federal judge specifically about this phenomena before, and she said that it was definitely considered a form of human trafficking, legally speaking. All right, it's 9:30, so let's get, I meant to leave the mine. Let's get out of here, because I don't want to be out too late. All right, let's read this secret note and see what it is. Sam's holiday shopping list. Everyone's favorites. Nice. Useful. Bus stop. Yeah. So, you know, these are all things that really interplay, right? Consent really is part of everything. And also sort of like being able to be, say, in touch with our emotions and aware of how our emotions are impacting things means better consent practices with ourselves, right? If I'm, you know, consent is about emotion, not about pre-planning, rules, logic, that kind of stuff. And if I'm really disconnected from how I'm feeling about things, or if I'm stuck in a rumination spiral and getting into cognitive distortions, it's going to be a lot harder for me to really figure out, where do I want to set the boundary here? What is it I actually feel in this situation? Um, do I want to actually have a conversation with this person about how I feel they're treating me? Or is this more something that is kind of whatever? I don't like it, but there's nothing that actually needs to be talked about. All right, let's just hit the hay and stop here for today. Thank you all for joining me today. Gosh, good stretch. It's been really nice to talk about all of this stuff and just to hang out. And I've really enjoyed just every stream. I enjoy hanging out with you all. It's very lovely. As a reminder, please check out our class schedule. We've got lots of really great classes on the schedule, and we always like it when people join. Our next round of consent and leadership is starting this Saturday. So if you're in any kind of leadership, formal or informal, or even would like to be, and you want to get some really essential leadership skills and deepen the skills you already have, learn how to handle complex situations, learn how to create policy and procedures, learn how to deal with accountability, personal accountability, public statements, all of this stuff, how to own your power, etc. Check out the series. There are a certain number of discounted tickets available, so if the price is a barrier, you can always contact us and we can negotiate something. That's true with all of our classes. We also have a really great class coming up called Supporting Survivors of Sexual Trauma. I really, really recommend that as well. And many, many more things on our schedule. You can also follow us on social media, and you can support us on Patreon if you want to help to continue to fund free consent education outreach and also just our programming in general while getting access to all kinds of cool content and our Discord. Consider supporting us on Patreon. Jan, may I recommend you a book that mainly aims for children, but I also think is worth reading as an adult? Yes, please, go for it. Let me see. Okay, Ein Woke Voller Samstag by Paul Marr. I will check that out. Thank you. I will copy that and search for it online. All right, so then thank you all again for joining me. It's been really lovely to hang out. Oh yeah, I always need help learning German. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And on Sunday, we're going to have a special guest, Misha, who runs a coaching for men, consent coaching for men, and retreats on masculinity, who has become a accountability and business partner with us. And we're going to be interviewing him and just talking about our work together and everything. So it should be pretty good. Ash will be joining me on Sunday as well, so definitely be here for that. And yeah, that's it. That's all my announcements for today. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and thank you again for joining me. Bye.